Daniel had always thought of himself as a simple man. He wasn't the richest guy in town, nor the most ambitious. But the day Emma was born, he became the richest man in the world in a way no money could measure. He remembered the hospital room vividly, the beeping machines, the sharp smell of disinfectant, the sound of Mia crying softly as the nurse placed the tiny bundle in her arms. Daniel had leaned close, holding his breath until the nurse nodded. She's perfect. He had never cried in public before, but in that moment he let the tears fall freely. "Hi there, little one," he had whispered to his newborn daughter, his voice shaky. "I'm your dad, and I promise I'll be here for you, always." Emma grew fast. Her first year was full of ordinary magic. Late-night feedings, first wobbly steps, the way she would clutch Daniel's finger so tightly he could feel her tiny pulse. By the time she turned one, Daniel and Mia were exhausted but happy. He would rush home from work just to catch her giggles before bedtime, making ridiculous faces until she smiled. But around 18 months, Daniel noticed something. Other children were starting to babble words. "A mama, a dada, a ball." Emma stayed silent. She communicated with gestures, pointing, pulling on his sleeve, flashing the brightest smiles. "It's fine," Daniel told Mia the first time she voiced her concern. "Some kids just talk later. My cousin didn't talk until he was 4. Remember?" Mia nodded but looked worried. She began reading articles late at night, the glow of her phone keeping Daniel awake. Words like a speech delay, a developmental disorder, and autism spectrum began to slip into their conversations. When Emma turned 2, they decided to see a pediatrician. The doctor examined Emma, smiled reassuringly, and said, "She's healthy. Hearing is fine. Sometimes children just take longer to start talking. Give her some time." They did. Another year passed. Still silence. By the time Emma turned 3, Daniel could feel the weight in Mia's voice. "We have to do more, Dan," she said one evening as they sat on the couch, toys scattered around their feet. "I know she understands us, but something isn't right." Daniel agreed, and soon they were visiting specialists. Speech therapy became part of their weekly routine. Daniel rearranged his work schedule so he could drive Emma to her appointments. The therapy room was cheerful, full of toys and posters with words like a dog, a son, happy. The therapist would sit with Emma, encouraging her to blow bubbles, imitate sounds, use sign language. Emma tried. She really did. Daniel could see it in the way her lips formed shapes, the way her brow furrowed when she couldn't make a sound come out. She would look at him, frustration shining in her big brown eyes, and Daniel's heart would ache. At home, he made it his mission to turn every moment into an opportunity. While stacking blocks, he'd repeat the word, "a block, block, block." When feeding her apples, he'd say, "Apple, can you say apple? Can you say apple?" Emma would watch him intently, sometimes tapping his cheek with a tiny hand as though to say, "I hear you, Dad." The years passed like that, full of quiet progress but no words. At preschool, Emma was the quiet one. Teachers loved her gentle, thoughtful nature, but other kids sometimes stared, confused when she didn't answer. Some even teased her. Daniel hated those days most. He'd find her sitting silently in her room after school, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her face wet with tears. He would sit beside her and wrap her in his arms. "You don't need words for me to know what you feel," he'd whisper. "I know you better than anyone. You are my sunshine, Emma, and when you're ready, the world will be lucky to hear you." Still, the ache never went away. By the time Emma turned 6, Daniel and Mia had learned to read her expressions like an open book. They communicated through gestures, drawings, and sometimes just silence. Daniel became an expert in anticipating her needs, a glass of water before she pointed, a hug before she even knew she needed one. But sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, Daniel would lie awake staring at the ceiling. He imagined what her voice might sound like. Would it be soft like Mia's or warm and deep like his mother's used to be? He pictured her running to him after school one day shouting, "Dad!" and jumping into his arms. The thought made him smile, even as tears pooled in his eyes. His friends didn't understand why he still held on to that dream. "Whoa, Dan, it's been years," one of them said gently over a beer one night. "Maybe you should just accept that she might never talk." Daniel nodded but didn't argue. They didn't know. They hadn't seen the way Emma's lips trembled as if a word was right there but couldn't find its way out. They hadn't seen the spark in her eyes when she figured something out. He kept hoping. Birthdays came and went. Each year, Daniel made the same wish before blowing out the candles. Please, let me hear her voice. When Emma was 8, she started writing little notes to communicate. They were short, simple, hungry, sad. I love you. The first time she wrote I love you, Daniel had to excuse himself and go to the bathroom so she wouldn't see him cry. He taped that little note to his desk at work, where it stayed, yellowed and curled at the edges, a reminder of how far they had come. Life became a rhythm. Therapy sessions, school meetings, bedtime stories. Daniel never skipped a night. Sitting on the edge of her bed, he told her about brave princesses, kind animals, and little girls who found their voices when the world needed them most. You're my little warrior, he whispered after every story, kissing her forehead. Emma would smile and snuggle into her blanket, her rabbit tucked under her chin. By the time she turned 10, Daniel had learned to love Emma's silence, not as a void, but as a different kind of language. Her hugs spoke volumes, her smiles filled the room more than any sound could. But still deep inside, he waited. Waited for the day the silence would break. Waited for the moment he would finally hear her voice. He didn't know it yet, but that day was closer than he could have imagined. Emma's 10th birthday dawned on one of those rare mornings when the world seemed determined to be kind. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky a soft pink. Daniel was up before everyone else, quietly hanging paper lanterns in the backyard. He wanted this birthday to feel special, not just for Emma, but for himself. Each birthday had been another reminder of the years passing without hearing her voice, but this time, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Oh, by noon, the backyard was alive with color and laughter. Balloons bobbed in the warm air. The smell of grilled burgers and cupcakes floated everywhere. Mia had outdone herself with the cake, a perfect pink and white creation with a tenay sparkling on top. Emma ran around with her friends, her hair flying, her face glowing with excitement. Daniel watched from the grill, smiling. He loved that smile of hers, big, unrestrained, the kind that made his chest ache in the best way. Look at her, Mia said, coming to stand beside him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She's so happy. Daniel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Yeah, optimist. She is. When the candles were lit, everyone gathered around. Make a wish, sweetheart, Mia said. Emma closed her eyes, hands clasped, then blew out the candles in one big breath. Everyone cheered. Daniel cheered the loudest. After the cake was eaten, the presents opened, and the guests had left. The yard was quiet again. Daniel began cleaning up, but he noticed Emma sitting alone on the swing, the fading light of sunset painting her face gold. He put the trash bag down and walked over, sitting on the swing next to her. The air smelled like summer. Grass, smoke from the grill, sugar from the cake. Did you have a good day? He asked softly. Emma nodded, her small hands gripping the swing's ropes. Daniel gave her a gentle push, the swing creaking as it moved. For a long time they just sat there, watching the sky turn orange, then pink, then purple, then Emma turned to look at him. Her big brown eyes were serious, as if she was about to share a secret. Daniel's heart thudded. Something about that look made him sit up straighter. And then her lips parted. At first, Daniel thought he imagined it. Just a breath of sound, so soft he wasn't sure it was real. Then she tried again. Her lips trembled and a single word escaped, so quiet it could have been carried away by the wind. Daniel froze. The world stopped. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Emma, his voice cracked. He dropped to his knees in front of her, afraid to move too suddenly, afraid to scare the moment away. Say it again, he whispered. Emma's mouth trembled, but this time her voice was stronger, clearer. A dad. And that was it, Daniel broke. 10 years of silent hope, 10 years of whispered bedtime prayers, 10 years of wondering and waiting poured out of him in a flood. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tightly she squeaked in surprise. Well, you did it. He sobbed into her hair. Yeah, baby girl, you did it. You said it. Emma giggled, an actual sound, a small, sweet giggle, and rested her chin on his shoulder. That night, Daniel didn't want to let her go. He tucked her into bed carefully, sitting by her side as always. Can I tell you a story? He asked softly, not sure if she'd respond. Emma nodded. He began telling her the same story he'd told every night for years, about the little girl who was so special the whole world waited for her voice. But this time, when he finished, Emma reached out, touched his face, and whispered, I love you, Dad. Daniel broke down again, but this time he was smiling through the tears. From that day forward, Emma's words came slowly, but they came. First a few more. A mom. Yes. A no. Then small sentences. Daniel celebrated every single one like it was a miracle. 6 months later, at a school event, she stood on stage and read a short poem out loud for the first time. Daniel filmed the whole thing, crying behind the camera, his hands shaking. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still therapy sessions, struggles, days where Emma didn't want to speak at all, but the silence was no longer empty. Each time she said a dad, Daniel felt his heart expand a little more. He'd waited 10 years for that sound, and it was worth every second, because some words aren't just heard, they're felt, deep, deep, deep in the soul.